Anthony, who better to introduce himself than himself? So yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself, Anthony.
Greetings. I'm Anthony D. Mays, software engineer at Google and the owner and career coach at Morgan Latimer Consulting. I have been in the tech industry for 20 years. Started off as a kid from Compton, a former foster kid, sexual and physical abuse victim. Learned a love for computers at a young age. Attended the University of California, Irvine, where I majored in computer science. Never thought that Google would want to hire a black dude from the hood, so I never applied. Was contacted by a recruiter over LinkedIn, believe it or not, and interviewed in 2011, where I went on to fail that interview miserably and let down all black people everywhere in the entire city of Compton. And then after that, recruiter called 3 more times, and in 2013 I decided that I'd try again, this time working for a month and a half to prepare, and was able to get the job. And I've been at Google for the nearly 7 years since then. So it is certainly my honor to be with you all and to be participating in this discussion.
Thanks so much, Anthony. I'm always so heartfelt at your story. Thank you so much for sharing. Go ahead, pass it over to Corlette.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for the invite. I am Corlette James, and my background, my story, or my experience has been growing up in the Caribbean. My family migrated to the US, was on the East Coast for about several years while I was going to school, and decided through school to take a hospitality course, which I did and fell in love. Started working with a very known company, Marriott, for several years, actually doing various things, and then moved with Marriott, traveling back and forth, opening and closing hotels, as we would say. And then from there, decided to take on a managerial role, and then really started training and development for Marriott. So my total career with Marriott was about 17 and a half years. And then a couple of years ago, just had a really rough winter and was really tired of New York and decided to explore other opportunities. And with that being said, I was also contacted by a recruiter, said no at first, and then with the help of my family said, "What are you doing?" Somebody like Disney. And I said, "You know what, you're right." And they took the interview process. And from there, here I am 5 years later in an executive role for the hotels, managing the hospitality piece for them. And super excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corlette. As you can see, we have some really amazing individuals joining us today. All the hosts today, we wanted to have this event mostly to kind of move on from those discussions about donations and thoughts, and kind of more actionable discussions on what we can do to help and support our Black community. As we all know, there's been a lot of movement around us, and we're starting to really uncover the truths about America's systemic racism. And as we continue to support the movement, and we realize that it's not just a trend, it's not a momentarily small part of our history, but it's a continuous thing we need to be actively thinking about. We wanted to obviously host this event, but to start off our first question, Anthony, I know that you've done some individual and kind of grassroots work at your various workplaces. And so my question to you is, how do we continuously show up in the Black community at work, but on that level, as an individual, as a coworker?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think the answer that has prevailed in my mind is to remember that in our personal interactions with our coworkers, we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with people who can be different from the next person sitting on the other side of us. It can be easy, especially in the society that we live in, to project stereotypes and preconceived notions about types of people based on things like skin color, gender, so forth and so on, as opposed to seeing people as individuals. And, I like that, as we're thinking about, how to be supportive of people who may be members of a particular community or multiple communities, I should say, it's important to think about that individual as a person. You know, there can be a trap, right? And saying, you know what, you're a Black person, so you must need these things, and you must really want blah 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 blah. I never forget, I talked to a guy, a man who happened to be Black. We were serving together at some event, and I said, you know, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? And he looked at me, he's like, what? What's imposter syndrome? I was like, you know, that feeling where you get to a place of success and you don't feel like you belong, that you earn the right. And he's turned to me and he said, I don't know what that is. I've never felt that. I was like, really? Now, in my mind, I'm just like, you're a Black man like me. You haven't struggled with imposter syndrome? And no, he didn't. And I remember how taken aback I was by that, and how even being a Black man, I need to be reminded that not all Black people are the same. They don't experience life in the same way. Even between myself and Corlette, you know, growing up in the Caribbean as a Black person is different than growing up in Compton as a Black person. And, you know, there's definitely some intersection where there may be shared experiences or shared legacy, but there are differences too. And so I think that it's important that we as individuals think about how we can be impactful and influential to other individuals, no matter where they come from or what community they're in. I find that there's a couple of things that are really important. One is just listening. And we take for granted the difficulty of listening. It's very hard to do it, and it's very hard to practice that, and it's something that takes work. But learning how to listen without injecting yourself into the conversation and making it about you is very important. And understanding more about that individual, where they come from, how they see the world, is very important. A lot of people who listen to me think that they may begin by believing that, you know, my skin tone or being Black is the most important identity to me, and it's not. My identity in Christ is the most important identity to me. My identity as a Christian is the most important thing. But it's easy to see my skin color and say, oh, you must really care about, you know, Black things and agree with all these movements and organizations and whatnot, which isn't true. And so, you know, hopefully as people listen to me, they understand what my value system is and things that are important to me, and can respond accordingly. Similarly, you know, once you listen, you learn, right? If you are meeting someone who has experiences that are vastly different than yours, you want to take time to learn more about those experiences. Now, of course, you don't want to put the burden on the person that you're learning from. You know, there may be some questions that are acceptable and it makes sense to ask that person, but don't make them educate you on things that you can go and educate yourself on. And so I think it's important to, again, just have that knowledge, that background, and that learning, so that you can be more informed when you're engaging with this individual. And, you know, lastly, I think it's very important to act. If you say that you love someone or that you care about someone, it's not enough just to say that you do. It's important to act, to respond in some way, and to respond in a way that's responsible. And so, you know, being sacrificial in your engagement and thinking about how you can serve other people is very important, but it does require you to do something. It does require you to give a little bit of yourself. So I think those are the three things that I think about when I'm thinking about how to support my coworkers who may be different than me, but could benefit from my wisdom or learning.
I think you brought up some really great points, especially regarding like imposter syndrome. And I really like that you kind of consolidated it. So that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, Corlette, did you have anything to add to that?
I totally agree with you, Anthony. I will start to say that my background was very different. And my first interaction with racism was when I was brought to this country. So growing up as a child in the Caribbean, to 16 years old, and then migrating here, that was my first interaction with it. So it was all new to me. something I had to learn besides relocation, something I had to learn and embrace. But it really impacted my world as I started to grow within the business, as I started to grow within hospitality. And I agree with on every point you mentioned, Anthony. I would also say that, get comfortable in asking questions. You may think you want to approach it by being uncomfortable. This situation, we have to get uncomfortable. We have to get uncomfortable. We have to talk about it. We have to embrace these conversations with our cast. And I use cast or employees or host. Many people call them differently, but it's an uncomfortable situation. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but it's a needed conversation. So don't be afraid. I always tell my allies, I tell my friends, I tell my coworkers, learn, educate yourself on history, but ask questions. Because my experience is going to be different from Anthony's experience. And our experience that we're sharing with you, you can get knowledge from that to base how you can approach your cast or how you can have those gentle conversations with them. So it's super important to do that. And I will also add, separate personal issues from corporate issues. Let's be honest. If you're a leader and you're leading hourly cast, you need to be able to separate that. You need to be able to have those uncomfortable conversations in the right, safe environment and be able to answer those questions or do follow-up or do some research to answer to your employees.
Yeah, that's a really great point. In your experience at working, at your various roles at Marriott, as you're moving up through those levels, do you feel like there was anything on that executive or high level expertise that you felt like you wish people would know how to be a better ally for? Or is there the LinkedIn local audiences, we come from various backgrounds. Some of us are CEOs of small companies, some of us are executive stakeholders. And so what can we do on that level to support the Black community?
Well, I had several of those for two factors. One, I'm female. Second of all, I'm African American. So, I've always used that platform for me of taking care of my cast. I am their voice. I am their ally. And I think if you're a corporate, a CEO, you need to understand your stream, your body of cast members, your bodies of hourly cast, to know how to build your executive team, how to build your directors, what is the successes that will culturally bring them to success at work. And many people don't take the time, many CEOs, presidents don't take the time to do that. And you actually need to do that because your hourly employees, your directors, your managers is going to need that support. And in order to get there, you have to really educate yourself and look at your mainstream of who your cast is. Who are the people that are representing you? Who are the hourly cast that is going to be the voice or the culture of your company? So it's super important. And that's some of the things that I faced going through. And to get past many of those, I've developed several things for myself. One, always being that voice. I am the voice of everyone that reports to me. I want to hear their concerns. I want to hear their issues. How do I approach that? I meet with them regularly. I, have lunch with them. Some CEOs and executives are very uncomfortable in having lunch with hourly cast members. You got to get to know them. They've got to get to know you. They've got to build that trust that they can rely on you in times of need. During this pandemic, there's several families, we all know it, that is having some emotional stress right now. How do we connect with them? How do we have those conversations? There are many African American mothers who are suffering because they have sons, they have daughters. I have a little one. She's 14 years old, and I had to have the conversation about race with her 2 months ago. 2 months ago. I was hoping I would get longer before I have that actual conversation, but it needed to happen 2.5 months ago because of what's happening. So it's super important to think of it, of building your background, building a culture, building a comfortable environment for your employees to talk to their leaders. You're going to find a lot of information that you can build your company on strong foundations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I don't think I've ever had lunch with Dinny Jane, the CEO of Alphabet, but we can hope. We can hope that one day I'll have lunch with him. But Anthony, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, so there are a couple of tools that I think are important to understand. One is championing, and the other is mentorship. I think we're largely familiar with what mentorship is about, or hopefully we are. And mentorship is really about sharing uh, uh, skills and career wisdom in helping someone to navigate through a particular point in their career. Mentorship is something that I believe can go both ways. I can have someone more senior in their career mentor me on some things, but I can also mentor someone who's more senior than I on things that I know that they may not be aware of, and there can be mutual benefit there. Mentorship can be messy at times, right? Especially if someone is uh, confessing struggles or challenges that they're encountering and wondering how to navigate. As a mentor, you may learn about those things and seek to provide helpful guidance so that those individuals can be equipped to handle them correctly. So there's mentorship. Championing is different. Uh, Typically, with championing, what you will do is someone who's more senior or has more responsibility or is in a higher position of authority, perhaps. You're going to reach down and lift up and promote uh, certain people, right? To help them have the opportunity and visibility that they might not otherwise have. So perhaps as a skip level manager, you're going to reach down and, okay, we don't have enough representation or enough voice from these particular individuals. I'm going to choose one of these people who I think, have an outstanding background and are qualified, and promote them for opportunities for advancement. And so, whereas mentorship can go both ways, championing typically is a one-way thing, and you don't really get messy with that, right? If someone is championing me, I want to make sure that my champion sees my best, that they see my best work, best effort. If there's things that I'm struggling with, that's not really for my champion, that's for my mentor to talk through. And so, I think each of us can decide whether we want to be a mentor or a champion or both. One of the easy ways that we can be a champion without much effort is to simply go through our LinkedIn Rolodex, find people that we're connected with that may not look like us or come from our same background, and refer them to whatever company we're working at, right? If you see that they've got anywhere near the qualifications of an open position, send them on to a recruiter. Just pass the profile URL on to someone who is looking for talent. And that can be a simple way for you to be a champion for those individuals. And so, and then maybe you even follow up just to make sure that the recruiters are doing their job and establishing contact. So I think in terms of very practical tools, those are a couple of things that you can learn more about and think about whether you want to engage in that relationship or not.
I think that's great advice. Thank you, Anthony and Corlette, for your wisdom and actionable things about what we can do. As we go forth in this webinar, also wanted to move to ask questions on what the audience may want to know as well. So we have our first question that came in. So anybody can answer. Anthony or Corlette, feel free to just raise your hand and take it. So the question is, how do we be an effective ally for the Black community when it's unlikely we'll have day-to-day interactions with that community? This question is specifically coming from a person whose company is primarily Latin American. So based on bringing on Black employees is challenging for them given the racial composition of their region.
I think that's a great question. I would also ask you to start by looking at your community. Okay, that's another resource that you can tap into. If it's very difficult to find that talent, you can expand that. Okay, you can look within your community, you can reach outside of your community. Reference, as Anthony talked about, it's awesome. I use that all the time. I refer cast members, I refer managers, leaders who I continue to be connected with on LinkedIn and different social sites. But I think you also have to look at the community that you're in and the community to support and build from there too as well. It's a form of giving back. How do I engage in the community? How do I go out and support? I'm in a predominantly well, let's say the percentage is less than 1%, the community. But I can tell you, I made connections within that 1% of community, right? And reach out to them as resources. How can I help you? Here's my insight. I am available. How do I show up? How do I guest speak? How do I mentor? You know, how do I give referrals? You know, how can I help you with? And once you start doing that community reach, that community outreach, you're going to get more and more to build that community as well.
I love that. Anthony, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll sort of phrase this using a practical example. So let's suppose you have someone who's running an authentic Mexican restaurant, right? If you're running an authentic Mexican restaurant, it makes a lot of sense to me that you would hire people that have experience with authentic Mexican food, service, culture, so forth and so on. It may not, just the way that the business is structured or the clientele that you're going after, you may not have a great population of Black folk who are experienced in authentic Mexican food, and that can be perfectly fine. You may have someone else who runs a soul food restaurant, and you know, soul food has its particularity, its culture, so forth and so on. That may make it difficult to find people who, at least culturally speaking, don't have experience with soul food. But if one person is running authentic Mexican food restaurant, another person is running an authentic soul food restaurant, there's no reason that they can't collaborate together or teach one another, mentor one another on the aspects of the business that are in common. And the reality is that in the things that we do, even though they have specific peculiarities, as I've said before, that may make it difficult to you know, mix different kinds of groups together. That doesn't mean that there aren't patterns that we find. You know, I often go back and volunteer in the city of Compton when I have opportunity. And, you know, since the time that I left Compton, it is, the Latinx and Hispanic population has largely grown in the couple of decades since I've been to the city. And it doesn't stop me from being any less effective, right? I can be just as effective, because it doesn't matter whether you're Black, brown, white, you know, whatever. If you're looking to be a computer scientist, well, I know something about that, and I can teach and inform you of what it takes to get to my level or even beyond my level. And so, you know, I think it's important to find those things that are transferable across communities and actively invest in, you know, finding opportunities through LinkedIn or through Chamber of Commerce or the academic world, maybe reaching into high schools, colleges, and share your experience. And what you'll find is that it's not just a one-way thing. And I think it's important to mention that you will grow as a person as you teach and share skills and knowledge and wisdom that you have. It reinforces your own knowledge and your own understanding, and at the same time helps other people who are different. And so, you know, I think it's important to understand that this isn't about charity. There is mutual benefit to be gained from supporting communities that are different than yours, and finding ways to champion that camaraderie and connectedness.
Thanks, Anthony and Corlette. I think one of the things that is that there's mutual benefit, right, from both sides. Whether you're mentoring, you're championing, you're teaching. I think a lot of people often say, oh, I need to have diversity because we just need to make our numbers look good. But you will benefit from having people of color in your community. You will benefit from having their expertise, their insight, their background. And I think that's the biggest conversation as well too, is that it's not something where you need to have it, it's that you will benefit from having it. So thank you both for sharing that insight. We have another question that came in. So I believe we all have unconscious bias. How do you recommend we overcome the bias, and what are your suggestions to change organizational biases?
So if I can jump in there, I think the first thing to do is, so when you take bias training, you learn that bias in of itself is not bad. The decisions that you make based upon bias, without qualifying that with knowledge, that's where you get the problem, right? And so one of the easiest ways to disarm unconscious bias so that it doesn't cause you to make bad decisions is simply to be aware of them. And a lot of times it just takes you pausing for a moment before you engage with someone from a different background to say, okay, what are my assumptions? And as someone who professionally trains people on how to prepare for interviews, and specifically technical interviews, one of the things that I teach my candidates to do is to stop and to check your assumptions. And you do that one of two ways. Either A, you acknowledge what the assumptions are, or B, you ask questions to be sure that those assumptions correspond with fact. And so when it comes to unconscious bias, it's important for us to expose and understand what they are, so that when we're making decisions, we can be aware of how those biases are influencing our choices one way or another. Some of this will come by way of education, right? You're going to do research, maybe peruse the internet, maybe talk to a colleague to help you understand how you might be influenced by biases that you're not aware of. Certainly it's important to have a network of people that you can talk to say, hey, do you see me responding to situations or to things in a way that seems off balance or off kilter? We should all have at least somebody that we can talk to that can give us that insight. And then once we're aware, again, we can make better decisions. The other part of that is that we need to be data driven. And we talk about data driven as a business concept, as a corporate attribute. But I think that even as individuals, we need to be data driven. We need to think about how data informs the choices that we make. A lot of times it's easy to rely on bias so that we don't have to do the hard work of really learning. But that doesn't help us, I think, in the end. So it's important for us to make sure that we've got the right data, that we've got the right things, right? That we've got the right benchmarks so that we're making correct decisions. You know, in hiring, this is one of those things that's really important. In hiring too often, biases are allowed to play a role in whether one person gets the job versus another, as opposed to, okay, what are the standards of the position? What do we actually need as an organization or as a team? And how do we hire for those attributes? Or how do we hire for those qualifications? And so I think there has been a failure in a lot of companies to really define, you know, what the position needs to be, and specifically those quality and attributes that should be filled in there. But once you start to think about that a lot better and get more data driven, it helps you to avoid making those decisions that fall to bias, conscious or unconscious, that aren't helpful in the end.
Anthony, I agree with most of what you've said. I also think from a corporate level, you know, I have been blessed to have had leaders or executives, CEOs, who has been very open with their approach to learning more and wanting to learn more. And I think once you're on that executive level, you really have to do that self-reflect. You really have to dig in deeper and said, what oh, the questions I should be asking. What is my team thinking about? How should I be approaching this? Do I need resources? Do I look for help? Do I bring in outside help? I think in order to get past that community of not talking about it, you really have to self-reflect and ask questions, even if you're a CEO, if you're an executive. I may not know all of the answers, but I can certainly, I've always been very honest, and I've been successful with that because I've had great CEOs who's come to me and said, Corlett, I value your opinion because I know what you're going to tell me will be the truth or it reflects the team. And I think you have to get to that honest conversation and as a CEO to really self-reflect and really look for those resources to move your business.
Thank you both. We'll go ahead and move on to the next question. So we all know that there's a lot to be achieved when it relates to racism in America at every level. Everyone in the communities of color have been affected and impacted by racism in some form or manner. What do you feel are the steps that need to affect organic change between every human being beyond the protests, beyond the steps of state capitals and the city halls?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carlette, please.
Okay. Those steps need to really start on every level of our company, every level. I talked about it a little bit, and Anthony talked a little bit before about listening, educating yourself, looking at the resources. I'm telling you, change is here, change is now. And I can tell you that based on my conversations with CEOs, current company, we've reached out to each other. They've reached out to me. They've reached out to several of the executives and said, what can we do? How can we build this platform or foundation of change? And it's needed because our companies need it. I don't think there's going any backwards. I honestly think that we've heard the voices through the protesters, we have heard through our companies. If you're really in tune with your business, you would hear your cast cry for help. You would identify, those needs, and it may come in many forms. So whether it be financial, whether it be promotion, whether it be growth, whether it be through sponsorship, whether it be through mentorship, promotions, you've got to be able to be in tune and build that platform for a successful company to survive moving forward, because it's changing fast and we have to learn and get to know our people, our body, and react to their actions, react to their questions, react to their needs in order to support a strengthy, healthy cultural business.
For me, I felt to be sort of surprised or even impressed by the modern movement that we see happening. And I think that what helps me to engage in discussions around diversity and inclusion is my background as a Christian and my understanding of the Bible. And I'm not ashamed to say that colors everything that I do and see. And so when we're talking about, what does it really take to deal with this problem of racism and injustice in the world, we're asking a really, really big question. I think that one of the presuppositions that we start off with that I disagree with is that all people are fundamentally good and just, we make mistakes from time to time and whatever. And I have, and maybe it's just because I was abused as a kid, right? I just didn't have the opportunity to conceive of a world that was fair and just by default anyway. But I see I see human beings as being prone to inventing systems of oppression. I see human beings as being self-centered by nature and by default. And we try to do what we can to avoid, getting to the real deep depths of what we can do. But it is a challenge. We're fighting to be good, not fighting to be bad. And so there's, I think that that also causes me to look within myself and say, I've got some bad too. And I've got some ways in which I see other people prejudiciously or even racially inferior. I may not act on those impulses, but I guarantee you they're there. And so it allows me to have an empathy for people who disagree with how I see myself or how I see people who look like me and come from where I come from, and to be patient if they express a certain ignorance about what's happening. So, but even though I see people as being sort of fundamentally evil, and again, because this is what I believe Scripture informs me of, it doesn't mean that people aren't equally deserving of a common dignity and respect and worth. And that is important because for me, I'm trained to see people as people, not people by skin color, ethnicity, or this and that and the other. For me, all people reflect God's very image, and that's where that dignity and self-worth comes from. And so for me, it's very important to understand people rightly and to understand how that works so that I can then engage in a way that is fair and just and honorable. And I think that people in my own office respect me because I'm a person that just generally tries to love people, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, and to be a person of action to help in any way that I can. And I would love it if more people sort of shared, my understanding of how people work and were willing to help in that way. But the reality is that it's not that way yet. And I'm certainly glad that there are people who are stepping up to say, I don't like the way that things are and I'd like to do something different. But, we've been at this particular point in history a number of times. And I'm not just talking about the civil rights movement, all throughout history, we've had situations where one group has asserted power over another. And it's just a thing that we repeat over and over and over again. And I think the best that we can do is for any moment recognize when we're in that and work against it with all the power and might that we have. And certainly I think it begins with each of us making a decision to do something different. I think it begins with each of us deciding to use the tools that we have to counteract systems of oppression, or even the oppression that forms within ourselves. Just, bringing this answer to a close quickly, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to share their narrative. So we all have experienced differentness at one point in time or another. And I think it's important for us to connect with that moment of differentness, to build a bridge of empathy towards other people who may feel that differentness or who may feel more of it. Because then that allows me, again, to understand how a Latinx, Hispanic person may be struggling, or how a woman may be struggling, or whatever, and find the proper motivation to be helpful and assistive in any way that I can. And so, these are just sort of thoughts that I have put all together. But I think if we're looking at how to deal with racism and injustice at all the levels, we've got to fundamentally rethink how we see people, how we see ourselves, and move accordingly from there.
And Anthony, may I add, diversity and inclusion is, people think about it as Black History Month once a year, we go through this. Think about it this way: diversity and inclusion is year round. It's every day. It's every day you go to work, you need to be engaged, you need to think about those changes, you need to make those decisions for your mainstream body of team, no matter what color they are and what race they are. It's every day. It's a year-round process. It's not once a year that we celebrate, it's every day. And I think a lot of people forget that.
I love that. One of the things that Anthony did, for many of you who may not know, me and Anthony worked together in the Google Irvine office, and he made this board on Google. I think it's just Google Boards or something,
It's
and
like
he made
Google Plus, Google Currents.
something like that. And he made all of, if we could, we would write down our stories and our narratives. And our office isn't very large, and so you would recognize the people who are writing these stories. And I thought that was so valuable because, and he came up to me, he's like, Carol, I really appreciate you contributed to it. And it was just so humbling and so amazing to hear my coworkers who maybe I've never spoken to, I've just seen in passing, to see what they've been through. There's just so many stories that are left unheard, and so many valuable things we can learn by just reading. And so that's one thing that I think that's a great piece of advice, is to just hear people's narratives around your workplace, see where they come from. I was just on a call with Corlette when we were first meeting, and Corlette came and immigrated from another country, and it turns out Vasu, another co-host, also came from the similar place, and you'll just realize how interconnected everybody is. We all come from this very similar backgrounds, and so I think that's really valuable. Thank you, both of you. We'll go ahead and move on to the next question. So have you ever experienced any microaggressions or forms of racism in the workplace? And if so, in what way could you organize or have handled that situation better? Or in parentheses, was it handled in the way that you were pleased with?
It has happened several times. And I think given my background, given the hospitality, if you think about hospitality, if you think about elderly that really work, the body of it is usually mostly immigrants, okay, African American, Latinos. And I have, over the years, championed myself to be a voice for them on many, many levels. You know, we talk about financial, we talk about health benefits, we talked about, you know, again, getting to know their needs, what they are, what is most important, and childcare, big issue. When you're a single parent and you have to find childcare to come to work to support your family, you know. So on every level, I have somehow embraced, and I've always lived and came back to what their needs were more so than what my feeling or the company feelings were, and champion that to change to my CEOs, my executives, how it will just make our base, our foundation so much stronger, because you're going to have a parent now who's coming to work that requires that childcare needs to be more involved, right? Take care of our guest on a bit different level because she feels comfortable, or he feels comfortable coming to work because their needs are met with childcare. So you know, you just have, to me, be able to find what that need is, what it is that represents them, voice it, and be able to champion it to a different level. There has been many, many challenges and many battles lost, but again, going back to that team, I think even if you can reason and you can think about and you thought about what their needs are, and any small progressive steps help, right? Okay, we didn't get this, but how can we twist or turn or look at this differently? Or maybe we need to get outside help to figure out what is the solution that's best for the cast, the base, and the company in the same. So in a sense, it's always a work in progress. It's always strategizing. It's always making those righteous decisions that, where I talked about before, separating that personal to really the company issue, and kind of merging it to where it fits the need of the base of the company in general, to be successful. as well as the team members, because you're not going to have a successful if you don't manage that balance. I have been taught very, very early in my career that if you don't have a happy, honest base staff hourly, you will never be successful on a corporate level, because they're the ones that's going to drive your company, your culture, your base, everything moving forward. And you've got to connect to them. And it has worked for me because I always connect with them. I always have my bosses connect with them. You've got to always take care of their needs to be successful. And I think many people don't realize that, especially in certain industries, they don't. You really have to have that success of that outcast space, being trustworthy, comfortable in speaking to you, coming to you for mentorship, promotions, however you may take. But it's super important that you connect with the hourly.
So for me, in answering the question, have I dealt with moments of racism or microaggression, and how did I deal with it, and how would I deal with it differently? I'm quite glad to admit that I haven't had many or really any memorable moments where I've encountered either overt racism or even microaggressions. And it could be just because of the way that I just generally see people and give them the benefit of the doubt. Or it could just be that I've been fortunate enough to avoid situations that other people have been in. I enjoy the team that I work on, at my company, and I have been treated so excellently, probably better than I deserve. I'm not sure that I would get that on another team within the company. So I do know that bad things happen, but for me, it's been great. I think the only thing that I've been impacted by, or a concrete way in which maybe I've been impacted because of my skin color, race, could be lost job opportunities. And it's really hard to know because I've been on interviews, looked like everything was going great, had fantastic discussion, things seem to be vibing, and then I don't hear back from the company, or I just get a flat out no with no additional information. And I think there was maybe one time where the experience that I had in the interview didn't line up with the response that I got afterwards. And I felt that perhaps race or culture could have played a role. And I think that, that's one of the tragedies, particularly when it comes to hiring, is that a lot of these situations where race may have played a factor, it's hard to go back and assess whether it did or not. And to then, as a candidate, hold a company accountable, or even as a recruiter, to hold the company accountable. So that's been an issue. I think that the way that I have had to deal with microaggressions before, in the way that I've had coworkers who've come and made religious jokes to me, knowing that I'm a Christian, or because I was wearing a particular T-shirt one day, someone would crack a joke, and that's happened on a few occasions, even where I work presently, and that's been unfortunate. I think that the way, and I don't know that I dealt with it necessarily the best in that moment. I tend to give myself more time to do the relationship building so that I can have that discussion. But I think one of the most important things that I can do is just ask, hey, what do you mean? Hey, can you explain that a little bit to me? I don't quite get that. And any time that we're seeing microaggression, or when we see something that could be perceived as a microaggression, or see, maybe someone talking to someone else and bias is coloring their the things that they're saying, or it doesn't seem to align with culture, you want to stop and just, as much as possible, one, pull that person to the side so that you're not putting them on blast in public and putting them on the defensive. Move to a private conversation if you can. And then secondly, just, hey, ask, here's what you said, here's how I perceive that. it didn't seem to make sense to me. Can you explain it a little bit more? Or, hey, maybe you didn't know that by saying this, that could be perceived as offensive, but I just want to let you know that, there may be people who will take it this way. And a lot of times you can, instead of escalating a situation that wasn't intended to be escalated, you can bring that down and then, again, build more, build camaraderie and togetherness so that that unity can happen. So I think that one of the mistakes that happens in companies is when you start talking about bias busting, when you start talking about conquering racism, everybody sort of arms themselves with sword and shield and engages in battle, right? And allyship is not a battle, or at least to me, I don't think that it's productive to think of it as a battle or as a military campaign. I think it's more helpful to think about, how we achieve that higher ideal of unity and togetherness and reconciliation that helps a company move in the right direction and in a better direction, right? And helps us to get a more productive bottom line. And so if we're thinking about it that way and not as a zero-sum game, then I think that generally helps how these interactions play out a bit better. Oh, Carol, I think you're muted. Can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes.
Ah, there you are.
Okay, all right. So anyways, the question coming in was about how did the organization handle it, and if they did, and was it appropriate, or did it foster an environment that was conducive to reconciliation? So we'll just do a minute since we're kind of low on time. Either Corlette or Anthony can answer.
For me, the organization did handle it, and they handled it. I've had several occasions. One was really, really bad, and one handled very, very well. So I would say the organization handled it very well, and what they realized is that this was bigger than what they were willing to commit, and then they brought in outside help to support and really get to the core foundations of what the needs were, which we appreciated, and that brought other things out, or more things to light. So I thought that approach was well handled and delivered very well, and ultimately it was not a quick fix, but it took over time to get what the needs were that was met and really helped the team. But I tell you, that team has been so successful and has built great things and moved on to extremely good foundations. But it started at this uncomfortable point to get there. And it took time, it took several years, but I've seen it go the opposite direction too as well.
Thank you, Corlette. So that is all the time that we have. Thank you to Anthony and Corlette for your wisdom and for your time. I'll pass it over to John to just kind of wrap it up.
Thank you, Carol, Anthony, Corlette. Absolutely incredible information and just such a great way that we can start to begin the process of thinking what are some actionable ways we can make change in our organizations, in our business, in our relationships, and just general friendships. Just a lot of notes here that I think I'm going to take back, talk with our team about, and kind of figure out, how do we move forward? And so thank you so much for your time. It's the middle of the week, so for everybody to even be here, we're just really grateful that we can have a community show up like this and stay for as long as everybody has. So just a couple items here. We said we're going to be recording this, so we'll have an email come out probably in the next couple days that's going to be with the recording of this. So if anybody missed it or had to go, or if you want to share with somebody in your organization, in your business, this would be a really great opportunity for that. We also have just another reminder about our nonprofit partners. We didn't do any tickets for this, and so our hope is that we would bring light and bring some awareness around the Equal Justice Initiative. You can check them out on their website. There's a lot of information there. They do some really incredible work. They have an awesome mission, so please check them out. Donate to them. That would be an amazing way to honor what we're doing here. And we'll also be doing a survey. The only way we can get better at this, and hopefully not for too much longer online, hopefully we can get back together soon. The only way we get better is to hear back from everybody here. You guys are our community, and so it's important we get to know you guys more. Please reach out to us, email us, text us, call us, whatever. Hit us up on LinkedIn, because this is what it's about, guys. And so we really thank you for your time. And I think I covered all of it, right? Right, Carol? Is there anything else we got? Great.
Awesome, John.
Thank you guys so much again. If you have any questions, please let us know. And you guys have a great rest of your day, okay? Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Corlette. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.